Welcome to MapCrow, the RPG art show. My name is Kyle, and today we are continuing our world building discussion by building some world builders. We're talking about pantheons today. This video is brought to you by the generous sponsorship of World Anvil, and we'll talk about them a little bit later. Pantheons are nearly ubiquitous in tabletop role-playing games and fantasy literature, but I could probably count on my hands the times that I feel it's been done really well. So to help me avoid some of the pitfalls that I often see, I am going to be calling upon the Pamphlet of Pantheons from the Monster Man himself, James Holloway. James does one of my favorite podcasts ever called Monster Man, which is a show about monsters because monsters are great. He also has a podcast called Deities for his Patreon subscribers, where he discusses the gaming implications of world mythologies. And back in Zine Quest 3, he kickstarted the Pamphlet of Pantheons, which is a zine all about how to create your own pantheons in your own games. I backed this wonderful zine at the digital level and then printed it out in booklet format and stapled my own little zine together, which I feel like I just don't see enough people doing. It's like people don't think that you can actually print out PDFs or something. I don't know. In any case, you should check out the links in the description below to find out where you can get this zine and listen to all these amazing podcasts by James. So let's roll a d6 to get our prompt for our patron of enlightenment and magic. I roll a 2, which says he has a rational face and is obscured by a mystical one, patron of seers and oracles. So as I am working on these simple shape studies, I'm really inspired by this idea of multiple faces, and I decide to really roll with it and kind of build this mask motif. I also build in this idea that it's just this kind of really weird, bulky shape that's hidden under some kind of blanket or quilt or cloak, and that gives you the idea that there's hidden mysteries underneath, things that few have seen, and perhaps even fewer wish they have seen. And this is really good. This shape is already kind of associated with spiders, which are also associated the world over with trickster figures, or figures with secret knowledge, or figures that have some kind of arcane special craft. So this is already like a rich image space to explore for us. Now this is where I want to suggest a way that you can improve upon your fantasy pantheon. And just to be clear, this is my own idea, so please do not blame James for my bad ideas. The way that I see it, mythology is chiefly about the same business that almost any good story is about: to help people understand the world better, at least in some kind of poetic or emotional way. So coming up with a list of made-up names and saying that these names are in charge of things like fire and water and magic does not a pantheon make, in my opinion. Because pantheons are about personifying beautiful or ugly truths about our world. And I think we really miss out on some powerful role-playing opportunities when we don't even attempt to make pantheons that say anything about our world or the fantasy world. They exist because they must. They are a trope. And I think we can do better than that. I'd like to share with you a short story from the sayings of the Desert Fathers. Father Lot went to Father Joseph and said to him, "As far as I can, I say my little office, I fast a little, I pray and meditate, I live in peace, and as far as I can, I purify my thoughts. What else can I do?" Then the old man stood up and stretched out his hands towards heaven. His fingers became like 10 lamps of fire, and he said to him, "If you will, you can become all flame." I first heard this story when I was speaking with a monk in training, and I have been pondering this little story ever since. At this point in my life, what I think this story means is if you turn your life into a series of checklists, you're going to miss actually living. You're going to miss the real truth, the real glory of life. We must leave the safe options. We must leave our anxieties if we are to become all flame. What I'm suggesting is that maybe if you're going to create a fantasy pantheon, you kind of make a collection of mysterious sayings or poems that really move you and pertain to these figures that you're saying are important to your world building. This is fun. Let's do another one. On our Keeper of the Dead, I rolled a 2, which gives us keeps regal, cheerless state in a silent palace beneath the earth. This prompt really reminds me of one of my favorite authors, Lord Dunsany, and his book, Gods of Pagana. Dunsany is really more well known these days for the people that he inspired, such as Robert E. Howard or H.P. Lovecraft, or especially J.R.R. Tolkien. I think the writing holds up on its own, and the language is absolutely beautiful. In Gods of Pagana, the Lord of Death in Silence, his name is Mung, and he is one of my favorite literary characters anywhere. And we get to know him not just from stories about him, but also in-world poetry written about him and the other gods of Pagana. This is the chant of the priests. This is the chant of the priests of Mung. This is the chant of the priests. All day long to Mung cry the priests of Mung, and yet Mung hearkeneth not. What then shall avail the prayers of all the people? Rather bring gifts to the priests of Mung. So shall they cry louder unto Mung than ever was their wont. And it may be that Mung shall hear. Not any longer shall fall the shadow of Mung athwart the hopes of the people. Not any longer shall the thread of Mung darken the dreams of people. Not any longer shall the lives of the people be loosened because of Mung. Bring ye gifts to the priests of Mung. This is the chant of the priests. This is the chant of the priests of Mung. This is the chant of the priests. See, now that's what I call world building. In that one little poem, you learn so much about the relationship between people and death and the gods and what kinds of people would worship the god of death. Now, I'm not saying if I wanted to run a Dunsanian game that I would just hand a couple books over to my players and give them a week to read over it before the campaign starts, but I think you could cherry pick little passages like this, little passages full of mystery and wonder and meaning, and I'd pass those out to the players, or maybe at least the divine casters, so they would have some other kind of connection to this pantheon other than reading like a history of the gods or something like that. I don't know, maybe you don't have the kinds of players who would care at all, but at least for GM note-taking, I think this is going to capture something about your pantheon to you that perhaps would separate your deities from any other kind of powerful magical figure. Now, if you want to organize your world-building notes on all of these beautiful new gods that you're creating and share this with your players on a customizable, beautiful hyperlinked site, then let's talk about today's sponsor, World Anvil. With World Anvil, you could hyperlink all of this beautiful primordial history that you're creating directly to the map, so you could keep track of where the gods fought and which ones fell. Or collaborate with your players and ask them to add their articles and poems about the gods that are important to their characters. Visit World Anvil using the link in the description below and use code CROW if you sign up, which will give you 40% off all new recurring memberships. And thank you so much, World Anvil, for sponsoring this video. Let's do one more of these today because I'm having fun, and I just read a cool poem that I think would work great for a life goddess. So we rolled a 5 in the old Pamphlet of Pantheons, and that gives us bountiful and generous to the needy, no matter who they are. So while I draw this giant goat with an old lady's face, I'm going to read the poem Allowables by Nikki Giovanni from her poetry collection, Chasing Utopia. I killed a spider, not a murderous brown recluse, nor even a black widow. And if the truth were told, this was only a small, sort of papery spider, who should have run when I picked up the book. But she didn't, and she scared me, and I smashed her. And I don't think I'm allowed to kill something because I am frightened. Wow. Yeah, I really love that poem. And I think it's probably a little bit too heavy to actually read at the table, but I think it's a great prompt to roleplay off of, to have that in the back of your head that this is what somebody believes is true about the world. This is the attitude they're going to bring into a world full of joy and violence and revelry and joking and friendship and death and all this. I think you could do a lot worse than to bring this into the game in some way. But hey, I'm not going to tell you what to do, and I'm certainly not at your table making sure you do it. Maybe what you think describes your Pantheon the best is a bunch of filthy limericks and drinking songs. I don't know. I just get the feeling that if you're making your own Pantheon to begin with, you have a sort of serious mind about it. And even if you don't want to collect a bunch of poems and songs for your Pantheon, you should still check out Pamphlet of Pantheons by James Holloway. I think it's a brilliant book to jumpstart your creativity in coming up with your Pantheon for your world. I think that just about wraps it up for this video. Tune in next week when we finish up our short series on world building. And if you enjoyed this episode, some of the ideas from it came from my discussion with my friend John on our podcast, The Splat Book. So you may want to listen to this week's episode on spirituality in fantasy role-playing games. So until next time, my friends, farewell.